go. So welcome everyone. I'm super happy to be here tonight because we're traveling. We're traveling in sitting here, but traveling and going to the States with Anthony and Rhonda, who will help us understand what it takes to get started in the US and to be successful, specifically for e-commerce. But like the US is big, and there's other things, or where we can be successful, where brands can expand. So I'm very excited to have both of you. We've known each other for quite some time now with MPG. So I usually start with a fun fact from someone. So we'll have one. So who's got a fun fact? Who's going first?
I think Anthony. I honestly, hello everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. But I don't really have a lot of fun facts, so I'm gonna ask Anthony for his fun fact.
Very nice. I see the dynamics, so that's throwing over. Okay, you didn't do your homework, so that's okay. That's okay. We'll pass on the fun fact. We might have to go back to that later.
Well, you like this, Jerome. I texted my wife. I was like, give me a fun fact about myself, because that's how it works. So for anyone that knows me, knows I love sports, especially college sports here in the US. And over the last few years, I was able to help my alma mater with naming rights for their two main sports facilities, for their football stadium and basketball events arena. So I went to Rutgers University. So did two pretty cool partnership deals for sports naming rights. So I'm pretty proud of that one.
Okay, that's a proud fact, and you can be proud. Well done. So we have someone actually famous naming a stadium, so that's cool.
Come on.
And now, thanks for the opening smiles, and maybe let's talk a bit about yourselves and about MPG, who you are, and why it makes sense for you to talk about the US.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll jump in. So Rhonda Johnson, really nice to meet all of you. My background is really in manufacturing. So, my fun fact is probably that I started out in finance, when I was a very young business person. And I did that for about 5 years and decided I didn't like to be in finance. So I went into commercial sales primarily. Within the US, have done some global stints, understand the global marketplace for sure. But it's just really nice to be here. We've been with MPG. I've been with MPG for about 7 years, as has Anthony. Actually, Anthony, that could have been a fun fact for us. So when I first met Anthony, I asked him if he was married because he seemed so young, a young buck. And I was like, I had a daughter that was like 24, 25. And he's like, sorry, Rhonda, I'm married already. So that might be my fun fact. But the reality is we've both been with MPG now for about the same time. And it's just been an amazing ride in terms of coming off of companies and brands and manufacturers like J&J and Merck and Bayer, and working with, iconic global brands, right? But the beautiful thing about what we do at MPG is we work with small, medium, and large. So I brought all of that, learning with me in terms of big company. But what I've really done over the last number of years with MPG is helped companies all the way from startup to US market entry, very much in the commercial sales and marketing space. So high intelligence on retailer strategies, things like that. And it's been a great ride. So Anthony.
Awesome. My background is a little different than my dear friend Rhonda. I basically have a sales and business development background, done all different things in that role. I've been at a large agency in New York City, to college sports sponsorships, to fundraising. And really when I joined MPG, kind of leveraged those hopeful skills to work across MPG, right? We are a CPG, sales services and consulting firm, which Rhonda will get into more. So I was kind of a utility player for a while, just kind of, bringing in clients across the board. And really 5 years ago, true story, I think it was like a Thursday, leadership at MPG said, you're getting on a plane Sunday. and you're going to Seattle and you're going to create our e-commerce division in partnership. So if you think of 5 years ago to today, e-commerce has become one of MPG's largest businesses, serving clients of all different sizes, all different categories, not only on Amazon, but retailer.com and beyond. And it's really a good bolt-on to the rest of our business, which you'll hear more about soon. So nice to meet you all.
Great. So let's learn a bit more about MPG, because the only thing I see is that different people try to get their daughters married with a different employee. So that's one aspect of MPG. But what does MPG do in a few words for brands?
Yeah, you know what? I'll start with first of all, I want to acknowledge and thank e-Comas in terms of we have a great partnership with Jerome and others at e-Comas. And interestingly, we overlap, frankly, in terms of some of our capabilities, some of our services that we offer to our clients. But I think MPG would always say 1 + 1 = 3, in that there's room for everybody. And so, I'm very proud and honored to be part of this webcast today, because competitors can look at each other as like competitors, right? We don't look at e-Comas that way. We really do partner in many ways, shapes, or forms. So here's what I would tell you about MPG. Primarily, we're focused on the US and Canada. I think we have global perspective, but we're primarily focused on the US and Canada in terms of the marketplace. We are end-to-end, so we can help you with your business strategy in terms of how you want to enter the US. And then we can also catch and execute for you all the way through to being your account management team, running your retailer businesses, retailer brick and mortar businesses, right? As well as all of the .com. So beyond Amazon, we do retailer.com, Walmart, Target, Costco, etc. We can also catch your inventory. So we have order to cash, full capability. We have a vendor number in the US. So we can catch your inventory and carry it through all the way through to the retailer. And then certainly not least is we've got a full suite of data. So IRI and Nielsen and Numerator and Kantar and all of those things that cost companies a lot of money. We have full service there in terms of having the data available. And then we also can be your analytics team. How do you analyze it? What are the insights, et cetera? And then very last but not least is around marketing services. So we can definitely help you with your marketing strategy, how you're interacting with the consumer broadly across digital, all platforms, et cetera, in terms of what we do, if that helps. Anthony,
you crushed it.
Well done. So I think that gives anything you would need to go on the American stage on many topics. Most probably MPG can do it for you, and that would be my view on it with my own words. But so thanks both for you on that. Let's say if we take a step back and we say, okay, let's say for an audience which is not from the US, how would you describe in your own words the potential of the American market, or why it makes sense, or why you would launch or you would expand to the US, and what's the size of the prize, or how you would is it a good idea in your own words?
Yeah, and Anthony, I think you and I can tag team on this for sure. But here's a couple things. I mean, we obviously know that I think in every strat plan, small, medium, large companies, like the nirvana, I'll call it, is to get into the US market, just because of the size of the population and the consumer spending and all of those things, right? Like I always think about, the US, you've got the US and then you've got Canada, and the US is 10 times larger than Canada. So obviously you want to go where, you're going to get the richest ROI in terms of your investment of time, money, et cetera. And so obviously there's lots of reasons. And I would also say that, it's rich in the context of diversity of consumer packaged goods. And we'll get into this a little bit later, but, kind of where the key trends are and what's happening in the marketplace today. I think it's a rich market, but it's not an easy market, right? I mean, I think Anthony always says for every one successful launch, there's 9 unsuccessful launches, right? And so it's a complex market, but right now the value of consumer goods in the US, that a different conversation in terms of what's happening in entertainment and the restaurant industry and all of those things, but the value of consumer goods right now, based on what we've been going through over the last 2 to 3 years, is significant.
And you talked about the challenges, like it's like 10% success rate is not very high, right? In terms of starting businesses. What are the main challenges? What, if you could put your finger on a few, I don't know, Anthony or you, Rhonda, of what makes a difference, or why there are so many unsuccess cases?
Yeah, I mean, Anthony, you may want to jump in from an e-commerce standpoint. I think it would be really critical for this audience to understand that. And then I'll pile on as well.
Sure. Just one thing on the last comment, right? The obvious one is there's a lot of fish in the sea here, right? But I think what's cool is there's so many different channels, right? You don't have to be successful in every channel day one. You're not going to get into all channels day one either. But right, there's mass, there's food, there's drug, there's e-commerce on its own. And I think that's unique. But I think of when you're entering this market, Rhonda and I always talk about, what's your strategic plan, which is obvious, but I like to go down a click, like what does success look like to you? Because then that informs everything you do, but it also kind of highlights what your obstacles could be, right? So I think everything from, does your brand resonate in the US? Is there demand for your product? What's your value proposition? And then once you solve for those big things, what's your assortment strategy going to be for the US? What's your pricing strategy going to be? What's the competitive landscape? There's no shortage of competitors here, no matter where you're playing. And then there's the other stuff, what's your fulfillment model going to be? Who are your right partners, et cetera. But that's a lot to digest. And, we got off a business development call this morning with a company that's crazy successful, Amazon US, and they want to enter the US retail market. And we kept hammering home, you have to have a strategic plan. Yes, you can talk to this retailer. Yes, that retailer fits well with your product. But what if you get in, or what if you don't get in? What's going to happen with the other retailers? So it's start at the high level, work your way down the funnel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the other thing I would add too, everything that Anthony just said is so critical. Pricing, right? Pricing is so important in terms of when you're thinking about, Anthony said strategic plan, but even from a business planning standpoint, as you're building out your roadmap, the cadence in the US is how do you do it in a way that doesn't deflate your pricing strategy and your pricing potential? Often people want to go to Walmart first, okay, we're on Amazon. That's awesome. And then they say, well, the next big bucket that we want to tackle is Walmart. And I was like, well, I shouldn't say I was like, but when you think about that, you have to think about your pricing strategy holistically. What's the impact of your pricing on Amazon? What's your impact of pricing on direct to consumer? And then what's the impact of Walmart in the US being a EDLP, right? They want to be best price in the market. Once you go there, it's really hard to expand beyond there because you can't go up, you have to come down. And so there's a lot of things that you need to think through in terms of how and why you're entering the US.
So, and like from what I'm hearing from like to the point of, what makes it, what's the difference between success and lack of success is probably a lack of planning or a lot of strategic reasoning behind of, what you want to achieve. And I think it blends really into, do you think there's a recipe, like you've given some ideas already about, okay, if you go everywhere, probably you will have a pricing problem and, you will have no profit in the end, or your brand will be damaged. So we see some ideas, but do you have a kind of recipe of, okay, what is the best successful path? If I'm a European brand, for example, and I want to expand into US, do you have a 5-step recipe, or what's your approach as MPGO for that?
Yeah, I would tell you that there's never a one size fits all. And the beauty of, what we do as MPG and e-Comas, you probably do the same thing, but the beauty at MPG is like we do a deep dive, like we always call it an immersion, but we do a deep dive on, the brand. I'm going to say the brand specifically. It might be a portfolio of brands, but the brand specifically. And we'll do a really deep dive to say, okay, what is the potential? And part of potential is also about the risk associated with, we often say as you're entering the US, you've got to be really thoughtful in terms of how you want to enter. Is it direct to consumer, which is really big right now in the US around, we almost recommend a brand always has a direct to consumer strategy. It doesn't mean that you need to pick and ship independently, although there's partners that can help you do that. But the direct to consumer opportunity is really around your engagement. From a branding perspective, your engagement with the consumer. You can direct the consumer to Amazon, but you want to build the relationship with the consumer first in the marketplace. And then what's really interesting, and it's a little, I wouldn't even say tip or trick, but the retailers, the brick and mortar retailers, they have people on their teams that are scrubbing what's happening on Amazon, in the marketplace, socially, right? Instagram, Instacart, Google, you name it. They're scrubbing for brands that they're interested in engaging with. And so we always say, I mean, again, it depends on the size of the company, the tolerance for spend. But we would always say, if you're entering the US for the first time, there's certain steps you do need to take. Anthony mentioned, brand relevance. Do you fit the culture? Do you fit if you can really create your value prop and say, I'm going to build a cadence of how I'm going to enter the US. Usually it's 3 years. I would say it could be as short as 1, it could be as high as 5, but there's a cadence because it's expensive. So you just need to make sure that you've got your vision right in terms of what you can tolerate in terms of top line growth and as well spend.
Yeah. I'll just add one thing. I think everything she said, right? But understand your consumer is everything, because then you place your bets on where you want to play. If you think of my comments from 5-10 minutes ago, you might have a great product for the natural channel here in the US. Well, that might be a great place to start. You can invest more in that channel, win there, and then you have a greater selling story for the other retailers where your customers are shopping. So I think it's just knowing your customers, and usually good things happen from there.
And it's, to your point, it's the consumer engagement. So not necessarily in the categories in which most of us compete that are on the phone right now, but I really like using Bird Dogs as an example, right? They're a sneaker brand. And they were only Instagram. They were hot on like their social media, Instagram, direct to consumer. They had a really good founder story around, don't quote me on this, but high-end athlete that realized that there was an opportunity to upcycle a lot of recycled product, right? And they created a great founder story. and they just ran that flywheel for greater than a year or better. And I think they just went public. Don't quote me on that, but I think they just went public. Huge success story. Again, big picture, not necessarily in the spaces of which we compete, personal care and OTCs, et cetera, but just a good example.
But do you think that it's very linked to the amount of money which was funding? Like maybe that like this success was funded by an enormous amount of money. Like, do you think that the key, obviously the story is great, but like comparable brand story, is it like to be super successful like that means a lot of money, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is we work with a lot of startups like family funded, VC versus private equity. And it's continuing test, improve, right? Drive revenue, build your business case, then get funding. So I would say maybe, maybe that was an example of like just having a ton of money, but I would tell you that we work with, and one of the questions I think you asked, Jerome, was around, this idea of what's hot right now in the US. But, I would tell you that small startups, family owned, female owned, Black owned, that is what's hot right now in the US in terms of, and these are small startups. They don't have a ton of money. They have just enough to get them to the next point of growth. And then growth then drives incremental investment.
Yeah. And to that point, it's like if you're advising, let's say I'm a small, I'm a regional brand or family-owned brand, and I'm maybe a bit well known in Europe, but not at all in the US. And then, okay, how do I attack the US? Like, do I go to D2C first, and then do loads on Instagram and Facebook and all of that, or do I go more to Amazon, for example, and reduce maybe the cost and just make a proof of concept? What would be your, like, if there's, I know it's not one fits all, but in that case, for example, what would be your first impression? Or
yeah, I'm gonna, Anthony, I'm gonna have you answer that question just because of the dynamic of Amazon. So yeah.
Sure. So because it takes there's a long lead cycle for retail anyway, so I think we should start there, right? You might have a line review meeting coming up in a month or two. That might, the planogram or to get your product on the shelf might take another 9 months or a year. So we're big believers in parallel pathing. So, my initial gut off of not having much info, Jerome, is, I would parallel path Amazon because there's a low barrier to entry. I'm sure a lot of folks listening now and on the future podcasts know what Seller Central is and selling in the marketplace. You can get that up and running, right? While I would also build your DTC website that might be more educational, informative, and focused on credibility. Because at the end of the day, if they go on Amazon and you're working to get those reviews higher and get that trust, they're probably going to Google you to see where you are, find your DTC website, and to truly understand what the brand's about. I know that we've had a lot of brands early on in their development where they would use the DTC website for just that. And instead of having a Shopify link, they would actually send people right to Amazon, right? So they were greasing the flywheel with more glance views, but they're also educating and hopefully collecting data so they can create that meaningful relationship with emails and such. So I would definitely get that business plan in place, but I would consider a DTC Amazon approach more than retailer.com, because using Walmart.com as an example, I think they're growing leaps and bounds. They don't have the same amount of efficiency that Amazon does, and they're still working to perfect their platform. So Amazon DTC, while you do focus on the longer term play as well.
Super interesting, because the idea typically with some of the brands, we would say, okay, if you have a limited budget, maybe you go first on Amazon, you wait a bit, and then you expand on others. But I like the idea of saying, okay, you want want to build the story behind it. Another very specific question, and I know it's difficult because it's theoretical, but if you have a brand and they have so let's say they have an Amazon, they're selling on a seller account, they've got a D2C account, let's say it's Shopify, and they're doing a bit of social. They have limited resources in terms of advertising, so that's typically when you expand, that can be the case. Where do you think it's better to focus on one, and for example, to use Amazon PPC because that's very effective, or do you think that no, you really need to also start to do a mix and look into what's working best? Do you have a point of view on that?
Yeah, lean towards focusing your investment on Amazon, right? If you think of DTC versus Amazon, right? Conversion is higher on Amazon than pretty much any other DTC website. So if you want your money to go to good use from an ROI perspective, I think you put it on Amazon via pay-per-click investments first. We all know they have other shiny penny offerings, but let's focus on pay-per-click first. And then with anything incremental, if there is incremental, I think you have to figure out as a brand, like, what do you want to accomplish? And sending traffic to DTC websites is expensive. So there could be a play to build up your social that can kind of tell your story. You can organically get that traffic, right? Via some scrappy things. Whereas DTC, again, we all know it's expensive. It's all expensive to get them there. And then we know it's even harder to get them to click. So I would follow the Amazon route with some incremental brand building, social, consumer engagement.
Makes a lot of sense.
Rhonda, like or spike?
On that front, it's like often like American companies coming to Europe often say, "Wow, it's super cheap to do advertising in Europe because the bids are much lower in Europe than in the US," and so vice versa. It means that probably if a brand looks into expanding into the US, they probably need to, like, be it a big or small or big brand, they need to expect to have to pay more, right, for the US market.
Yeah, not only from a pay-per-click standpoint, but this relates. So follow me here. We have a client that really gets the interest in their products via more traditional channels, think TV. And you think that's old school, but with all their TV advertising married with their digital marketing, they're sending so much traffic to Amazon organically and on purpose that their Amazon business just continues to, catch on fire. So I think there's so many different tricks and hacks to figure out how to, with a limited budget, how to win. We have other clients that are complete opposite, and they go with kind of the funny approach in social media and other channels where they've developed such a deep loyalty with their consumer base that then they can communicate at the right time, not every time, where to shop for their product. And I think that for scrappier brands, that's what you really want to do.
Yeah, well, it's always like the funny brands are great when they're funny, and then you've got all the other ones which are trying to be funny, and that you're feeling sorry for them. But the ones who do that well normally are really, really good. I wanted to come back to a point which you touched upon, is like a bit the retailer landscape. In the US, like everyone knows Amazon, everyone knows Walmart, we hear a bit of Target and stuff like that. Could you give us a broad overview of the retailer landscape, and if you're getting launched and you're focused on e-commerce, which are the really important ones and the ones which are more of a second step important ones?
Yeah. So I'll jump in and then Anthony, you jump in. So really good question. And I want to be respectful to all of our retailers in the US. What I would tell you is that, Walmart, Target, Costco, right? So, and I think they're pretty familiar brands globally, are doing really well in the marketplace. They've diversified themselves and they've accelerated pretty significantly in terms of their .com capability. So I'm going to call those three out in terms of great places to start. The value channel in the US, just based on the pocketbook and inflation and, unemployment what's the word I'm looking for? But unemployment in context of, the great resignation. I think people are being pretty frugal in the context of how they're spending their money. So the value channel is doing terrific right now. Dollar General, Dollar Tree. So that's another channel that's doing really well.
Just to be clear, the value channel for you is what we would call discounters or
Yes.
lower price points, right?
Yeah, a little bit of Lidl, a little bit of, Aldi's, right? So even though I think we kind of qualify them a little bit more as grocery versus value, but yeah, in that space of, good product at a good price. Grocery for us is doing phenomenal. But in part, again, it was, I would say, pandemic related in that people were buying, right? They were buying a lot more food than they used to buy. And the grocery channel did a really nice job of click and collect, curbside pickup, at-home delivery, all of those things. So they're doing really well. What I would call out, and again, I say it respectfully, the drug channel, just based on the evolution. So if you think about Walgreens, Boots, right? CVS, Rite Aid, they're having a little bit of a tougher time in that this idea of front end, back end, healthcare services versus front end product. And they did not have the luxury of being able to do the curbside pickup and the click and collect and the at-home delivery as well as some of the other channels did. The only other thing I want to call out, and then Anthony, you jump in, is, I'm really impressed with what Walmart has been able to do with their .com strategy. Target, really impressive. I think Costco is getting there, even though they're doing a little bit more like big box, higher end items. But yeah, I would tell you that's what the landscape looks like right now. And it has shifted. It has shifted. I mean, grocery is king right now in terms of where people are spending their money. Anthony, anything else?
You nailed it. I won't speak to speak. I think, I think Walmart, Target, Kroger, and the grocery channel for us.
Absolutely.
These are some of the ones that you think of when you think of they've morphed and evolved pretty quickly here in light of COVID.
So if of course, it's a difficult thing to say, but if we would say, if I had to a roadmap, let's say we would say 1 and 1.2 is the first one is Amazon, the next one is your D2C website. Then what would be yours? Would be Walmart, then Target, probably depends on the category, but Walmart in second, Target, Costco, is that what, or what would you?
Yeah, I mean, I would honestly say it depends on the category. So we work with nutrition bars. I would probably have a different approach for nutrition bars. And
so what would you do for nutrition bars, let's say?
Yeah, nutrition bars, I would probably, it depends on the positioning of the brand, right? And, but I would probably, with nutrition bars, certainly Target, right? And then you've got some of your, what I would call, alternative channels like the GNCs and the vitamin shops and things like that in terms of pure nutrition. Target probably fits in a better place than Walmart does, but you just don't know. It really depends on the brand positioning, the pricing. I always think of Costco as once you're in Costco, you just have to know that your pricing is set, right? They're going to set your price for you to a great extent. So you got Amazon on one side, you got Costco on the other, and then there's everything in between. So it really just
you can't enforce MAP with Costco,
you can based on your packaging strategy. In other words, you can, as long as you can uniquely build for Costco that separates you from other retailers.
So it's portfolio strategy.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, you need to have the portfolio which fits to what you're looking for to have
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
different SKUs. Okay, and like for me, looking from far away, in my mind, at least Walmart is very similar to Amazon in the fact that it's as wide and trying to be the second Amazon. Would you say that accurate or?
Jerome, is that a question more about selection?
Perception, customer perception and selection.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say so. I think they're both, Walmart is striving to be an open marketplace. They have a marketplace, it continues to grow. But I'd say yes, mainly from a selection standpoint, right? Who do you think of when you need to look for anything, right? You're going to Amazon and Walmart.com generally. And then for the folks that, there's incredibly loyal people to Target. Target doesn't have that open marketplace, right? So people that love their assortment, you'll go there pretty quickly as long as you're, an avid shopper. But I would say Amazon and Walmart.com far and away.
Who owns a marketplace in those? So Amazon, of course, Walmart has got an open marketplace for third-party sellers to come in. Who else on the US market has got a marketplace like that, which is open?
Like that. So Target Plus is closed. There's pure play accounts that have some level of marketplaces where they have like some distributor relationships with the big guys. But in terms of like, consumer, they're going to those two. And then the third one is a distant.
So all the others are basically working in 1P, like what we call 1P in Amazon, right? With a vendor account. So you have to sell to Target. So they have to buy your products for you to be on their website, right?
For most of their items, there's some clients of ours that will have, a 1P relationship, but maybe for tail items or incremental items, they'll say, hey, put them in our marketplace, even though again, that marketplace is closed versus what in Amazon Seller Central.
Okay, that's
I think, but I think the evolution is coming, right? I think what I would tell anyone that's thinking ahead 2, 3, 4 years, be ready to learn how to sell on consignment. And be ready to learn to get your product from your warehouse or a partner 3PL to the end shopper's house. That's coming. I mean, it's here now, but it's going to come bigger. And I think a lot of brands are nervous because they can't get over the financial implications, the tax implications and beyond, which we get. But I think there's only so much space in these fulfillment centers, right?
I think, it's, Anthony, I think, and, back to the global audience, I think that's an important aspect of, kind of where it's predictions, right? Like where the US might be going. But, stats in terms of like Walmart right now is opening a new facility in Mississippi. And that facility is just pick, pack, ship, right? They are no longer like Walmart used to be ship it in pallets, put it on an end cap and watch it fly. Walmart is moving so quickly in terms of creating capability around pick, pack, and ship. Don't quote me on the number, but I think they have, I'm not even going to throw out a number here, but there are a number of Walmart stores within the US that they're using as, call it, distribution centers for same day delivery, whether it's shipping it, whether it's delivering it with a truck. And so these stores are becoming hubs of, yes, you can still walk in as a consumer and buy, but these stores are also holding inventory to serve, right, a radius of geography that is pretty significant. And Walmart's not the only one doing it. But to Anthony's point around, at some point, based on how they're turning inventory, there may come a day where they come back to manufacturers and they say, we're buying you, it's on consignment. As we sell it, we pay you, right? Which is not the current business model in the US. It's really interesting.
Yeah, like logistics will become more and more important. I remember Jeff Bezos saying, for example, he was with his space adventures, he was saying that actually Amazon arrived because logistics like some people have built the logistics, and he wanted to build this for the future of people wanting to go to on the moon or wherever. He have created like a network of a cheaper way of doing it. So like what you're saying is that this is going to grow more and more. Like the Walmarts will try to leverage their strengths of having a lot of stores, and brands will have to get into, okay, how do I ship myself into a one day, like how can I get to that one day delivery thing?
Yeah.
And that's really interesting in terms of, okay, how you're investing in terms of your teams and capabilities internally to drive that, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the growth is here too. We have like companies like GoPuff, and there's like Uber Eats and DoorDash. They're expanding not only their infrastructure, but what they deliver from a category perspective. So I know we're talking about big retail, but again, if you think of the next few years, they're going to be big players in a different way.
That's super interesting. One question is, like, I was talking to a friend the other day, and we were talking about this logistics and the future of logistics, and he said, why don't we have an option to have green like deliveries, in terms of saying, okay, I'm ready, I don't need it tomorrow, it can take more time, and it becomes a greener thing, because the thing of having this 1 hour delivery or 1 day delivery is probably very costly, not green in the sense, like not very healthy for the planet. This and on top, and there's another thing is, sometimes I don't order on Saturdays, because otherwise the guy will come and deliver on the Sunday, and for me, I don't really need that on the Sunday. And I see, I'd rather have the guy, rest, and you'll do the delivery on the Monday. So it's like, and for now, you don't see those options of saying, okay, would you want to have a greener delivery, a longer one, or do you really want a 1 day delivery with what it entails in terms of social costs and green costs? It's a very European kind of question, but I think it's would that resonate in the US or not really?
Yes. I'm gonna say yes, just because, from a consumer perspective, I don't know if like Amazon is doing that now. So, I'm probably online every day. I was like, I forgot the toothpaste, I forgot this, I forgot that, right? And they're now asking that question in terms of, are you okay if we bundle? You've got 3 orders. Can we bundle the order and ship it to you on Friday? And sometimes they'll give you like $2 off, Amazon Prime or whatever it is. But I think they're starting to realize that there's efficiency in at least asking the consumer the question, for sure. So, yeah. I mean, Anthony, you might know it better from a business perspective. I'm speaking from a consumer standpoint.
Yeah, the only one I've seen do it is Amazon. I mean, I think, of course, there's a segment of population that cares about green and eco initiatives. I think there's a large percent of the population that almost wants Amazon to figure out what I want before I even order it, and it's on my doorstep when I get off this webinar, right? So I think it depends, but I've only seen Amazon in terms of implementing it.
Yeah, okay, so I think that's something which is interesting, and I don't know if it will be retailer-led or brand-led, this kind of thinking of saying, okay, as a brand, I need to be ready to deliver within 1 day. And typically the situation in Europe is that you have borders, right? So the 1 day delivery thing is super complicated. It's even more complex because, the transport company is probably one in each country. So you have different hubs. And as a brand, the question of saying, okay, how do I try to compete in my D2C exercise with, the Amazons, is probably to like shape it in a way which you're not really competing against, and say, okay, this is a green delivery, or you'll get it in 3 or 4 days. It's still okay, right? So I think that's very interesting, and that will probably be led by brands which are not, or that's part of their values, and are not afraid of trying to test those kinds of things. And that's something that will be interesting to see in the future. Now, I don't know, in terms of, we talked about successful and unsuccessful brands. One question I like to ask often is, like, do you have a success story, and interestingly, maybe not someone who's got millions of dollars. It's not like someone what in terms of strategy, and they had a plan, they implemented it, and they were successful. Versus okay, maybe something which was less of a success, and the learnings in those cases.
Anthony, do you have I'm trying to think of, Grove comes up for me all the time, but I think Dude is actually a really great example as well.
Can you tell us a bit about the brand? So, because I'm not sure, if I know.
Yeah, Anthony, do you want to talk Dude, or is there somebody else that you want to?
Yeah, I love their story. They're a perfect case study of a company that digitally native brand. So they didn't come from Europe or elsewhere. Digitally native brand, really great founders. They had a wipe for men. I won't explain further. And they grew their loyal customer base, their shoppers, by really connecting with the brand. And they told a great story and had snarky humor, still have snarky humor today. Crushed it online over time, a lot of hard work, and then took that success online and had a really great selling story for the retailers. So, if you think of what we talked about early on, it's the retailers care about what's hot on Amazon and Instagram and beyond. So if you can truly highlight not only the sales growth, but what are the reviews saying? Did you create a new category? Did you disrupt some things? And then you naturally will grow into the retailer space, obviously in the channels that you care about. So I think that's a great story. And Rhonda, I love the Grove story. If you don't mind talking about that.
So Grove Collaborative was the company. They were D2C based. They definitely had their own brands, but they also carried brands from other manufacturers as well. But they had a great, and I said this, I think earlier on, they had a great founder story, which was around sustainability. And so they had products that were refillable, and then they had the refills, right? Really around sustainability. It was really around natural cleaning and again, all on trend. And they had a significant business on direct to consumer, and they wanted to expand in the marketplace, Amazon as well as Target, and now even beyond Target. And we helped them with, and I say this we, meaning, from a strategic standpoint, we really needed to make sure that we did not disrupt and or cannibalize their online business as they started going into brick and mortar. And it's just been an amazing success story. Like Target fell in love with them in terms of a brand. It took some time, trust me. It took some time, but Target ended up falling in love with them and put some exclusivity around the brand name. They brought it into store.
Do you have any tips? Yeah, sorry. Do you have any tips on how to protect? Like, what did they do? Like, it's different SKUs, or do you have a few tips you could share, which is like not secret?
Yeah, really good point. So I'm always going to go back to pricing, which you got to have pricing in a really good place. And I think you have to hold firm, because once you give in, you can never go up. You can only go down. So I always start there, because that's really critical to a business's P&L. Right? Your margin and everything else. So I always say start with price, but I think it's a really good point, Jerome, in terms of like the assortment, making sure that it was unique to Target and it resonated with the Target guest, right? So Target guest is consumer in the US. And what was online was not necessarily what was going to resonate in the Target door. So yeah, I would say assortment, but I always go back to the 4 Ps, which are product positioning, your pricing, right? All of that stuff is really critical as you're thinking about expansion.
Okay,
that could be expansion within the US, or it could be expansion from international into the US. How do you make sure that you're holding all those threads together to make sure you're protecting your brand? And or within locally.
Makes sense. And do you have an example of like a failure or something where it didn't go as predicted? A less nice story.
Repeat the question. What was your question?
Like,
Like
not
a
it's
failure?
like yeah.
Yeah, I'll call out one. Obviously not by name. And I actually don't think this company's failure at all. I actually think they have good business. But one element where if you don't have a plan and you're selling to anybody, distributors, retailers, name other folks, where you just want the sale, we all know there's a downstream negative impact to your business, because once that product's out there, people are savvy. There's a lot of hustlers out there going to resell your product. And what I see with not only this brand, but many other brands, is they're competing with themselves, not only for the end sale, the margin. And we all know on Amazon and other platforms that when you're competing with yourself, we all know they're not putting their best foot forward to show up well on the digital shelf. So it impacts, what the shoppers think about your brand. So I think that's kind of one watch out I say about selling to anybody. Be careful about the implications.
Yeah, and I guess, Jerome, now that Anthony's talking, the only other thing I would add is the importance of your assessment and the saturation of the market. So one of the things that, we counsel clients on is make sure you understand like the future potential growth. I'll use probiotic, prebiotic as a great example. Like that space is so crowded right now in the US. You don't even know as a consumer, you don't even know what to buy at this point. What's good? Is it 30 million, pre-probiotic, strains? Is it whatever? But my point is it's a really crowded market. And so as you guys are thinking about entering, guys and gals, really understand the competitive space. What's the upside for the category? Who are your competition? And then how do you separate yourself, right? What's your value prop versus everything else that's in the market right now? Because there are some categories that are pretty saturated. So.
Yeah, so what I take from the different things you've said is first is like, and that's wherever you are in the world, is what's your brand story, right? What's the story of your products? And that goes from the founder story to, why are you here? Why this product? And what your points of differences and points of clarity and so on. So it's basically all that. It's like, make sure you have a great story to tell to consumers and a great product, of course. So the second one. And then third is like, start from small maybe, or a few in terms of distribution, and going step by step and being super careful about the pricing, because I love what you said, Rhonda. That's true, and also everywhere in the world is like, well, especially with Amazon, is once you go down, is like there's no way up again. I was talking with a customer in Europe saying, okay, I want to grow my prices, increase my prices on a vendor account. So probably can take it 6 months, a year, or never, right? So those are the 5 things which I think is true actually wherever you are. But is there something where, and that would be maybe our parting thought, is like to like this thing, having a good proposal, understanding the competitive environment, cool. But is there something specific which really works well, or you need to be wary of when you're going to the States, if you're non-American, of what it takes to be successful in the States? Well, one simple thing, or cultural, or anything which would be on not really book marketing, right? Which is a bit like your gut feeling of, okay, when you feel a foreign brand is coming and not getting the American culture, or a French, an Italian, a German brand coming to America and understanding the culture. Do you have it like as a parting gift?
Yeah, I don't know if there's one thing. I don't know if there's one thing, honestly. Like, as I was thinking about the question of, and I think everybody gets this that's on the call right now, but your branding and your packaging right? Does it resonate in the US? So your brand means X in the US, right? We've been through this where some brands just don't translate at all. I think packaging is really critical.
Even in e-commerce, would you like, sorry to challenge on that? Yeah,
I do. Like I was just
Yeah.
going to say, even on e-commerce, like we worked with a client about a year ago on a global brand, out of India. And the packaging was not going to resonate in the US in terms of even on Amazon. What the product was, medicine-based cure for an ailment, and the packaging was red. Red is like red flag in the US. And we're like, I'm just giving you that one example, but we're like, can we just change the color of the packaging? Because red is negative in the context of this type of a situation, medicine needed for X, versus something much more calming, much more confident, much more. So I'm just giving that as an example, but branding and packaging is really hard. But what I would also say is that marketers and companies are very passionate about their brands, right? So they're like, but we're not changing our brand or our branding or packaging. But recognizing those nuances in terms of the US versus another market and or one market versus multiple markets is really critical. That's the only thing that I'm thinking of, Anthony. Anything else on your mind?
Yeah, I actually learned this from you and a few others at MPG and real live examples. I think channel and retailer platform prioritization, have your roadmap, win, and then grow. I think it's as simple as that to me.
Yep, I agree.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you everyone for listening. I think that that was really interesting. Thank you very much for your wisdom, and have a great afternoon, great evening for the people here. And I look forward to seeing you everyone on the next webinar. Thanks, Rhonda. Thank you, Anthony.
Jerome, thank you for including us. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening, afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.